Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Preacher. So in this episode, obviously we had the plan of let's examine the DVD, Jesse's taking it into a place to kind of get it examined. And I love how that whole situation broke down of them being like, oh yeah, don't worry. Yep, here's the serial number. You can't see anything. He's like, what are we talking about? I thought I want. He's like, no, don't worry. No one can see the serial number. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Which is so interesting. The fact is that they're so complacent with this whole thing of like, yeah, you shot that dude, but don't worry, no one will ever find out. It's like, you're willing to help him, get away from crime and stuff like that. It shows you where their morals are. It's like, hey, you're a paying customer. You want, because Jesse's like, what are you talking about? I wanted to see the serial number. It's like, well, why did you want to see the serial number? That'd be, evidence against. She's like, I'm not the one shooting the gun. If I was the one shooting the gun, why would I bring it in? It's like, I don't know. So you could, cover your own ass, cover your trail. And it's so fascinating that turned out to be the case and just them acting like that. And I just thought that was just so fascinating. Just like, okay, almost like, you idiot. Can you zoom in? Can you do something else with this? So they work it a little bit, but there's nothing else to the DVD, so Jesse kind of gives up. Because for Jesse, this is kind of an all or nothing, because he has to find God. And on top of it, he kind of puts it out there too. It's like, hey, I gave up part of my soul in this search to make it count for something, that it isn't all for nothing. And now he's just like, there's no leads or anything, and he just thinks the whole situation sucks, because it's like, that's even more reason why this whole God situation, because part of me also wonders kind of, obviously, we see, Eugene pop up in the episode, but kind of I'll save that for a little bit later on. But first of all, the whole situation with Jesse, he keeps saying that he hasn't forgot about Eugene. That's the last thing he said in the season finale. But it's like, makes you wonder, has he not? Is this just his own personal reasons of trying to get the guy? Does this even have anything to do with Eugene? Because he doesn't bring up Eugene as the real reasons for doing what he has done. So it makes you wonder. I mean, maybe Eugene is one of his main motives of wanting to find God, but obviously as a preacher himself, is just a believer in God and just wanting answers about everything. I guess also answers about why he ended up with Genesis and no one else, because everyone else that had Genesis inside of them immediately exploded afterwards. So like Tom Cruise, for example. So this is like an all or nothing for him, and is now for it not to be anything. Which obviously at the end, when we see the disc being destroyed, it's like we read the bottom of the disc and it says Grail Industries, which is kind of interesting, because throughout the episode we also saw commercials playing behind Jesse in the store too, which is like, I thought it was like, oh, this is some secret, super secret organization. It's like, no, they're a public organization, business, even because they're called industry. So it's like, what do you actually do on the sideline? Are you up front of being a religious group, organization or whatever, or is that part of your side business? What do you sell? Because you call it industry. So I guess so it isn't, but then is it not government funded? Maybe it is, but obviously the whole keeping up the front of a legitimate business instead of being a group that's preparing for the end of the world type of thing. I don't know. It's kind of interesting to me. Which then immediately, but the fact is that it was Grail Industries that did that. Immediately my brain goes off in multiple directions. Because initially when that came up, I was like, because there's a lady behind the camera, and I was like, what if it turns out that the person behind that was Laura, who she pops up in this episode too. The lady going by Laura, who works for Grail Industries. Might be someone else. But then that immediately makes your brain go off in so many different directions. Why set this whole thing up? Why, are you working with the angels or something like that? Because how do you set that up for him to die so he can go to heaven? It's they have to have some pipeline there. Maybe they have a phone too that lets them contact heaven. Maybe there's an angel that works with them, that works in Grail Industries. But it's Harry's supposed to be the top of the food chain, not unless there's someone above him. Granted, maybe Grail Industries is the Grail is a subsidiary of another subsidiary, of a shell company or something like that. Maybe there's a group above them, because when we heard about Harry's story last episode, it's oh, where's Jesus? He's in a government facility with all these guns on it. So definitely there is a government element behind it, but I don't know, for that to happen, because it's they killed that actor so he could go to heaven to play the role of God. So it's they have some kind of connection there. So they must have some hotline to heaven. Maybe some people from heaven, rogue angels, started Grail Industries and kind of been working it behind the scenes or something. I don't know. Keeping up this whole myth about God and everything so people won't go looking for him. I mean, obviously, plays to a certain angle in Grail Industries' favors, because like the last thing they want is, because we saw what happened in Anvil, the moment people feel like, yeah, God's missing. So I don't know, it's just kind of an interesting thing, and I'm curious to kind of find out like their real motives behind it. Maybe that really is legitimately it, like it's just enough to buy them enough time to, you know, find God themselves, as well as wait for the end of the world, you know. So because it's not just for like the loyal like people on earth, it's also to keep like even angels that were asking questions. So I'm sure it's only like the top brass of angels that knew about him being missing, because I'm sure like it never came up in conversation, but I'm sure DeBlanc and Fjord themselves didn't even know. Yeah, definitely, because I forgot, like Fjord found out like this season, like, wait, God's missing? It's like, yep, he's here somewhere on earth. So once again, you have to be at the top of the totem to kind of know that. So that was just kind of interesting. Another part of this episode, since I brought her up, I'll talk about her, is Laura. Obviously, her and the bartender are, you know, played by Malcolm Barrett, are... I did not realize what in particular place they were until like Tulip started going throughout the episode, but like they're in the apartment, the last apartment on the same row of apartments that Jesse and them live on. They're like a couple apartments down at the very end of the hallway, and I thought that was kind of interesting, because Tulip is basically, you know, still suffering with this whole situation of the cowboy is still messing with her mind and everything. She can't really sleep. She's still going to the Hurt Locker and stuff like that. It's her way of compensating, like I said last episode. But we see her like filling in the holes in every apartment because she doesn't want any reminders. It's like he's gone. It's her process of like moving on. She ended up getting a new fridge and everything. But then she ended up meeting Laura, or aka Jenny, and she's like, oh yeah, talking to her. It's like, oh, you have a gun and everything. Jenny's like, oh, I'm getting away from my crazy ex. And it's like, oh my god, you like the same type of cereal I do, awesome, blah 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 blah. And then it's like, oh, have you ever, like, you know, worn a vest and got shot in the chest? And she's like, no, it sounds like fun. It's like, yeah, it is, we should hang out sometime. It's like, yeah. And you see this smirk on her face, like, okay, so now she has an in with the group, because this way you have to, because, you know, it's like, because she's apparently got their whole apartment all cameraed up, which I'm curious, like, was that before or after the cowboy? Because the fact of the matter is that hasn't really come up in reports, so it must be like after the cowboy incident that they did that. They probably waited until like everyone was out of the apartment, because there's probably very few times, except for the whole cowboy situation, where everyone was outside of the apartment, so they probably took that opportunity. I'm surprised none of them actually ran into the cowboy and got killed. That would have definitely been interesting, but nevertheless, so now this kind of gives her a more hands-on approach, which is very dangerous when you actually think about it, because it's like, well, Jesse's seen her face. He knows her as Laura, and the moment she pops up again, he's like, yo, what the hell are you doing? Like, Laura? And he's like, wait, Laura? She said her name was Jenny. Wait, is this the same Laura that you've run into before? So there's that element too. So I'm very curious how she works her way around that. I'm sure her partner is going to be bringing it up too. It's like, how are you going to get close to them when Jesse's already seen your face? We'll just kind of have to wait and see on that front. Then another part of this episode dealt with Eugene. We see Eugene's in hell, getting yoked, getting tatted, like got a big tattoo on his back, getting muscular and buff. Learning interesting things, like apparently you use duct tape as toilet paper in hell, so that's interesting. I guess they don't want to make it soft. They got to make it hurt a little bit. You know, you're in hell to be punished and whatnot, so... And there's also the interesting thing where the douchebag ended up tying the caveman to the TV, not tying him, but taping him to the TV, and it was kind of burning him a little bit. So Eugene, secretly trying to be nice, turns it down. So I'm guessing like it's legitimately a real fire that if you get near it, you can, I don't know, because the fact is either that or, I don't know, because like Eugene was turning something down, so it wasn't the volume, so it had to be like, maybe it was the volume, but it seemed like it was more like he was turning down the heat of it. So it's, I guess it's hell and everything, so it kind of makes sense. But obviously we play it up in this episode of the whole aspect of, oh, if you're nice, you get thrown in a hole. Like, we ain't here for that nicety shit. Like, you are in hell, you play by hell's rules. So obviously Eugene's keeping it up. But Hitler catches moments of like, Eugene, you try to act tough and everything, and it's just all a ploy. And it's like, but I know the real you. You're actually kind of a nice guy, but he's playing up the douchebag angle. But then we kind of learn an interesting development. Initially, I thought this whole situation with like the brownouts when it comes to like everyone's individual hell, the kind of holograms that created their hells, I thought like, oh, maybe that was an inside job. Apparently, no. What it seems is that every, you know, probably cell block gets their divvied up energy. Like, it all comes from one power source that gets divvied up, probably different blocks and different sections, and it's allocated by the number of people that are supposed to be in hell. So it's like a very precise amount of energy. But this brownout's been happening because there's an extra person here, someone that's not supposed to be in hell. We know it's Eugene, but the fact of the matter is they're trying to figure it out, and everyone's like, no, it was me. I'm not supposed to be here. And then you have Hitler being like, I know it's you, Eugene. It's like, what did you do that was so bad? Because like Eugene's like, no, I deserve to be here. It's like, what did you do? It was a girl. It's like, oh, did you take advantage of her? Did you kill her? It's like, I kissed her. It's like, Eugene. Like, that's the sad thing, is because Eugene looks at it as his fault. Like, that Tracy had the reaction that she did. It's like, it's not your fault. You cared for her, you liked her, and you made a move on her, and she reacted the way she did. And he took that blame upon himself. And that's the most twisted thing. Like, everyone, even Jesse thinks, like, you know, that's the truth of what happened. But we as the audience now know, is like, you were just an innocent kid who just... no one would, once again, maybe he told the truth, or maybe he just took the guilt upon himself. And it seems like that's just who Eugene is. Like, he probably, you know, maybe he grew up as a Christian boy. Like, if something happens, you take responsibility for it. So he's been taking responsibility for it the entire time. That's why when Jesse kind of made it go away, the problem go away, he's like, no, I deserve it. You know, he's very self-hating. He's like, I deserve to be what I am. I deserve all that I get. So. But Hitler's like, you can't actually tell someone that you're actually not supposed to be here, because the moment you do, they're going to put you through something much worse. You think all this that's happening in this room is the worst of hell? It's like, no, there's a lot more to hell, because apparently Hitler was like, they had high hopes for him being Hitler and all that. But it seems like Hitler is very docile. I know, like, once again, it's like crazy that I'm saying that. The weird things the show Preacher makes you say. But he's very docile, and I guess he's not the evil man that Hill was like, oh, you could be the new guy. I mean, granted, we don't know how the whole Satan / Lucifer thing works in this universe. We know God exists, so you can only assume Satan / Lucifer exists. So it's like, that hasn't really been delved into. I think maybe it has. I vaguely feel like it might have been brought up, or it might just be imagining or thinking about something else. But nevertheless, you know, maybe they had high hopes of him kind of running hell a little bit, but he kind of was like, no, I'm done. You know, I'm kind of keeping to my own corner. So that's why he kind of gets punked a little in hell, because it's like, oh, he's badass Hitler, but he's very meek and doing nothing. So it's a situation where I think he's just biding his time, because later on he ends up talking to Eugene about escaping. That's why he ended up selling Eugene out, in the sense of like putting Eugene in a situation where he'd be nice, and they put him in the hole, and there's like, oh yeah, what's down there? The extrapolator. So what it seems is the extrapolator takes the worst thing that, in Eugene's case, that Tracy situation, and it messes with it. But then I was like, but then it turned out positive for him. It's like, oh, Tracy's like, you kissed me. What? He's like, I'm sorry. And she's like, you like me? And he's like, yeah. She's like, I didn't. Why didn't you tell me you liked me? I like you too. And it's like, oh, wait, what the hell is going on? For a moment, I'm like, wait a minute. Is it because his memory isn't, because his hell thing isn't that bad, that his extrapolator just couldn't really do anything with it, make it worse or anything? Because at first it's like, oh, it's legitimately the same thing, so it's not. For Eugene, it's hell, but to anyone else, it's like, it could be worse compared to other people's. I mean, granted, we got a peek into Hitler's. We still never found out, like, what made his hell so bad. Like, it was that... wasn't it in Munich or something like that? Like, what about, it was like him on a date and something like that. It's like, what really made that so bad? I, at the time, was like, I think it's because Hitler was kind of forced in the whole situation of being pissed at people. Like, he didn't actively want to be that. He didn't want to be like the representation that he eventually became. Like, it seems like it was a role that's kind of thrust upon him, and just so he wouldn't look weak and sentimental, he bought into the role, you know. Once again, that situation where it's almost like I'm trying to make sense. Like, it's like, oh yeah, justify Hitler's actions. In no shape or form am I doing that. I feel like I have to explain that, you know, with the way things are. I feel like I have to express it. In no shape or form am I trying to justify what Hitler did. I'm just saying, for the sake of the show, I'm curious what they're doing with it and that, and I'm just showing out my thoughts on what it could be. I feel like I can't stress that enough. I don't want anyone misinterpreting what I'm saying. Hitler sucked. Hitler was a bad person. He knows he's a bad person. Everyone knows he's a bad person. Let's leave it at that. God. Anyway, but it took a hard twist when there's flushing in the bathroom. It's like, who is that? She's like, I wish you had told me. I'd already given myself to someone. It's like, wait, what? We just had this conversation. You were about to kill yourself because your boyfriend, what was it? Didn't he cheat on her? But it's like, but you're already going on to someone else. She's like, yeah, I'm giving myself to God. And lo and behold, who comes out the damn bathroom? Freaking Jesse Custer. I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, I've given myself to God. And then like, you have Eugene be like, he's not God. I mean, also I'm leaving out the fact that they had that little sweet singing moment, tears in his eyes. I was like, oh, and that scene is such a mind fuck because it catches you off guard. You're like, okay, what is this? Oh, it's beautiful, it's sweet. I kept waiting. I was like, okay, where's the fucked up thing going to happen? And then it happened, and it's just Jesse and then Tracy start making out because it's like, yeah, he's God to me, and start making out. And it's like, preacher isn't God. What's going on? Stop it. He picks up the gun. He's like, go ahead, Eugene, finish the job. I told you I was coming right now. And it's like, what the fuck is that scene? And so immediately my brain goes, could this be something that would eventually lead Eugene to hate Jesse? Because on some level, I think he does hate Jesse. Like, everything that Jesse did, Jesse putting him in hell and everything. Yes, he'll argue who would deserve it, but I think on some level, he harbors hatred towards Jesse. And I felt like that might be the direction this might go, where it's like, oh man, he gets like, I don't know, I feel like circumstances will unfold to kind of force him to kind of end up hating Jesse and everything. I'm very interested in what's going to happen when him and Jesse cross paths again, because like I said, like, Jesse makes it seem like Eugene is going to be his main focus of, like, oh, I haven't forgotten about you, which arguably, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I feel like he kind of forgot about Eugene, so when the time comes, because it seems like Eugene is getting himself out of hell because Hitler's like, I did that to show you, because the fact of the matter is, you would be stuck there not just for the hour that you were. They put you in there for a very, very long time. You have to be, you're living your hell is already bad enough, but that's adding an extra layer on top of it, making it worse. So I think like something's going to happen where he's going to be forced to relive that over and over again, and eventually when he actually gets free or whatever, or whether Jesse rescues him, whatever the case may be, he's going to end up despising Jesse a lot. But I don't know. But it does seem like Hitler has a plan to escape hell, which is kind of interesting, because now that means Eugene's going to be escaping hell with Hitler, maybe other people too. We'll just kind of have to wait and see on that. But it's such an interesting development. I'm just so interested to see like where Eugene's story goes. And then the final thing I want to talk about in this episode is the whole situation with Cassidy, still struggling with the whole situation of like, like Dennis wants me to bite him, and just he's conflicted on it because like he wants to help out Dennis, but it's like being a vampire sucks. He has a whole conversation with Tulip about it. Like, Tulip, would you want to be like me? And she's like, oh, the whole vampire thing. Well, you get to live for a long time and nothing would hurt you. I mean, it's like, well, things still hurt, but not, she's like, you know what I mean. And it's like, well, yeah, but the fact of the matter is, because you live so long, like obviously the downside is like, hey, you can't go to the beach anymore. And it's like, oh, I used to go to the beach with my mom and my bro, which is kind of interesting. I don't think he ever mentioned his brother before this episode. He brought his brother up twice. But he's like, oh, can't go on the beach, which Tula's like, I never was much of a beach person. I kind of hate the beach. But he's like, yeah, but eventually you've heard every joke. You get bored of life. Like, nothing's a surprise anymore because you've lived for so long. And then on top of that, everyone you care about, the typical thing about being a vampire, everyone you cared about dies around you until you're the only one left because you're the only one that survives, so not the easiest thing to live with. So, and that's even Tula was like, yeah, that sucks. So, combining that with like an earlier scene where like you have Cassie being like, oh yeah, Jesse, can you help me out? I don't know how this whole Genesis thing works. Dennis is sick and everything. Now, my mind immediately, I initially interpreted it, like, I didn't know how to interpret it, actually. It's like, either it's like, hey, he wants Jesse to use Genesis to possibly try to heal him, or like ease his pain by killing him. I would assume it's the former, but, for a merciful situation, you might consider it like the latter might be an option, but I think it's definitely the former. But you had to just look in Jesse being like, oh, I can't, I don't know if it would actually work, but also I don't think that's what Genesis should be used for. You almost see that look in Cassidy's face like, yeah, sure, bro. Yeah, sure, Padre. And it's almost like, fuck you. You see it in his eyes because it's like, Cassidy never asked Jesse for anything. It's like, Jesse wants to do something, full blown ahead, let's go. I got your back, Padre. You're my mate and everything. But it's like, the moment he asked Jesse for one thing, use Genesis for this one thing, you won't do it, you selfish prick. And you've used Genesis however way you want to. It's like, you hypocrite. You who sent an innocent kid to hell, get bit. And that's also another thing too. what about when Eugene finds out about Anvil? Because Anvil happened because of Jesse. Like, the events unfolded like that because of his, like, need to ask God questions and stuff like that. And it got revealed that God was missing. So things in Anvil unfolded the way they did because of Jesse. So technically his fault, you know. So I don't know if Eugene will feel that way or not. I don't really know if even Jesse feels that way, but whatever the case may be. But we also, in this episode, also get, you know, him calling up Seamus. I would assume Seamus is the same guy who called in the first episode of season 1. Because, like whatever, like, backing he has, we've never really dived too deeply into, like, Cassidy's story on that front. Obviously, this episode, we got to look at him in, like, 1946, being like, oh, I'm going to try and be a good dad. But that's as far as we went with that. We don't know, like, whether he was there for some of Dennis's upbringing or whether it's a situation of, like, he left pretty early on in his life, or what. Did Dennis start getting older, but he stayed the same? So he was like, no, I got to bounce. We don't even know about Dennis's mom. So much of that story we still don't know about, but hopefully we kind of get it in the next episode. We are kind of leading that direction, so we'll see. But I would assume this is the same guy that, like, Cassie was like, yeah, I don't know where I am in season 1, being like, okay, could you strap me some money? Because even Shane was like, okay, do you need some money? He's like, no. He starts asking questions about, like, he's like, yeah, I ran into one of my sons. He's sick and he's dying. But then Seamus asked the question of, like, what kind of temperament do you really know him? It's like, he's my son. But yeah, but do you know him? And the fact is, he said temperament makes me think, because running theme I've always seen a lot of times in it applies to a lot of supernatural creatures, but I think specifically with vampires, that when you become a vampire, whoever you were, your personalities, your issues, and so it's an element that kind of plays up on Teen Wolf. Yes, werewolves, but still, it's a thing of, like, your issues as a human kind of get amplified as a vampire. So, like, you know, diving a little, I won't use an example, but, like, say, like, if you're someone who, I mean, it's the same example, but if you're someone with anger issues and you become a vampire, that aspect of you is amplified. Your personality, your issues and stuff is amplified. So that's why he's asking, like, do you really know Dennis? Like, Dennis might be a homicidal maniac that's amplified even more when he becomes an unstoppable killing machine. So, which even then, they haven't really discussed, like, do stakes work on vampires in this universe? Like, because it's never really been established, like, what can kill you. I mean, it's like, even Tulip brought it up, it's like, you literally got your finger sliced off, drink a little bit of blood, they grew back. So it's like, you know, so far it seems like the main thing that can kill them is sunlight. That's kind of their main enemy, because they'll burn to a crisp. But that's about it. We've never really seen, like, oh, stakes or silver or whatever the case may be, like, what weaknesses a vampire has in this universe. So, I mean, because everything, like, every different series has its different aspects of, like, how much damage a vampire can take before, like, there's no coming back. That's something I kind of brought up, I think, last episode, you know, so, but it does seem like at the very end you have Cassidy, like, I guess, singing maybe a prayer or just an old folky song to Dennis, and Dennis is kind of looking like, wait, what? And then you see the look in Cassidy's eyes. So it looks like Cassidy has made a decision to do this. Like, I guess he's like, once again, he's been a shitty father all of Dennis's life, and I guess this is his opportunity to make up for it to him. So he's trying to do that, protect Dennis. So what will come about this, whether he will ultimately do it or not, we will just kind of have to wait and see. But overall, a fantastic episode, and I'm very eager to see what goes down in the next episode. Especially because, let's not forget, Hair Star is on his way, because even Murph brought it up in the episode. It's like, oh yeah, what about the boss man? It's like, oh yeah, he's on his way. So things are going to get very, very interesting next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.